In October of last year, I had the privilege of visiting quite a few anime cafes with Emirichu, but one of those restaurants stood out amongst a sea of other anime cafes, and that was the Jujutsu Kaisen cafe at the Tokyo Hotel in Shibuya. I don't even consider this place a cafe. This was a full restaurant experience. It was an amazing dining experience, and it was one of the most expensive anime-themed restaurants I had been to while I was in Tokyo. If you want to see that entire experience that we went through, I'm going to leave that link down below, but today I'm going to be remaking what I think is a hopefully better version of the entree from this dinner. I thought that entree was amazing, but there's a few tweaks that I want to try to see if I can make it better. So I guess this is the very first anime cafe, but better. Jujutsu Kaisen, why is that so hard to say? Jujutsu Kaisen version. Now, after going back through that video that we had filmed at this cafe, I took down a bunch of notes about how to remake this dish. The first thing I have to do is remake the sides. Each of the sides represent one of Gojo's students, Yuji, Megumi, and Nobara. First is the red beet puree, which represents Megumi. The reason why I'm roasting this whole is because I actually need some of this to put on the plate versus just pureeing it, and this is gonna take like an hour or more to cook. I'm gonna roast those at 350 degrees until they're ready. I don't know when that's gonna be. The next side or sauce is going to be the carrot ginger puree, which represents Yuji, which I thought was interesting because Nobara has kind of like red hair. Why does it represent Yuji? I don't know. I don't know why I said these things. This is super simple. I have these really beautiful carrots that I got from a local farmer's market, and I'm just going to cut up a few of them to use for the puree, and then I have some more that are going to be used on the side for the plate. And there's a very interesting reason for that I'm going to talk about once we go to plate this up. These carrots are going to get boiled in some water to get nice and soft, and then I'm going to puree them with some fresh ginger, but I need to boil the water first. The carrot and ginger puree needs some ginger, but this is not going to be cooked. This is going to go in raw, so it's nice and pungent. All I'm going to do is peel back this ginger. Once it's peeled, this is where I'm going to slice it nice and thin. And then once I have these nice, really, really thin slices, this is where I'm going to slice these into little bitty sticks. And once the ginger is into these beautiful little matchsticks, they're very small. They're not actually the size of matchsticks. This is when I'm then going to essentially brunoise these, which means like really tiny cubes. The reason why I'm doing it this way is so that it incorporates itself really nicely into the carrot puree. Otherwise, I think if this were cooked, you would lose some of its potency and some of that bite. And if this were turned into a puree, I think it's just gonna lose a lot of its body. I really like cutting it like this for a lot of things. Once the ginger is done, it should look like this, nice and small and ready to go. I'm gonna put this in my little container and set this aside because I didn't start the water. We're still waiting on that. You know what I talked about earlier. Now the last sauce or side is actually going to be for Nobara, and this one is a soy and onion puree. It was very interesting. It was essentially caramelized or cooked yellow onions because it had a little bit of sweetness to it, which honestly, in hindsight, could have come from just sugar. And the onion is cooked in soy sauce. It gives it this really beautiful, caramelized, nutty, deep flavor that you can't really get otherwise. So I'm just gonna dice up these onions really nice and small because you're able to form this into what's called a quenelle or a quenelle. I can never pronounce it properly, but it looks like a three-sided football, and it's a little French technique that you use to make something look really pretty on a plate. Okay, onions are done. This is ready to go, and my water is boiling. Look at that. We did the thing. I'm gonna take my little handful of carrots and just pop them in the water while we finish this up. Ah, that's hot. Oh God. Oh, that was so hot. Don't touch a metal lid. That was over boiling water. That was very silly. Okay, onions, done. We gotta get these cooked up though. What, Gandalf? What? I have nothing for you. Maybe if this were a Demon Slayer video, we could have attached one of those notes to your neck to take to a Demon Slayer of some kind. But this is Jujutsu Kaisen, and the only animals that we have seen are bunnies, I think. Don't quote me on that. Making the onion puree or side is actually relatively simple. I'm actually going to be making it similar to how I did it for that Yukihira video. A giant dab of butter goes into the pan, and once this butter is about halfway melted, I'm gonna add all of my onions straight to that. Now I actually don't want this too high. I don't want this to get too much color from direct heat, so we don't wanna really char the onions at all. I'm just gonna cook these nice and slow and low in this butter until they get super soft. Now while these are cooking, and those are cooking, and the carrots are cooking over there, I'm going to continue to multitask and roast these carrots that are gonna be used for the side that are now covered in onions and butter. A little bit of olive oil right on top of the carrots. And these are just gonna be kind of cooked through till they're nice and soft. And then when I'm ready to serve the dish, the carrots will be ready and I can just reheat them with more butter and more everything that makes them good. After a few minutes, my onions are nice and soft, but I have to deglaze this. Hold on, don't go anywhere. I wanna deglaze this with a little bit of sake. This way we're not immediately deglazing it with the soy sauce, because then it can just get too soy saucy and get really salty. Deglazing it with any kind of wine or sake is very important, so this way it releases a lot of the flavors from the pan itself, and the sake is going to give this some flavor. If you can't have sake and you are taking the adventure of making this dish at home, you can skip that step and just deglaze it with a little bit of water instead. Now that most of the sake is cooked out, look at that, almost no liquid in there. This is where I'm going to add in a decent amount of tamari. This is just a really nice soy sauce. Now I'm just cooking this at a really low heat until most of this liquid is evaporated, and then this thing is done. I'm constantly stirring the onions so this way none of that soy sauce can burn, because that is one thing about soy sauce, is that if you don't pay attention to it, it can burn very quickly. These onions have been cooking about 5 or 6 minutes now, just nicely reducing, and look at how jammy and beautiful this looks. This is ready to go. And one thing that I noticed about the dinner that we had in Shibuya when it came down to a lot of the sauces is that they were kind of just room temp. They weren't very hot, weren't very cold, and that does a couple of things. It changes the temperature of the steak as you eat it, because the sauces are meant to eat with the steak, but it also means that the sauces can hold their shape very well when they're plated up. This almost becomes a soy sauce onion jam, if you will, which is, I have to taste this. Hear me out. If you don't do anything else from this video, make this. If you don't want to make the steak, everything, just make this, put it on toast with a fried egg, and I promise you, it's gonna be amazing. I literally couldn't resist, so I got myself a piece of sourdough that we get from a local bakery. I'm putting a bit of this tomato jammy stuff right on top. Not even tomato, it's onion. I was thinking tomato jam. Get out, do not attack this. You can, you can smell. Cheers. All right, good. Do not lick the knife to trust. That's so good. It's so good. The carrots, super simple. I'm just gonna drain the liquid. Once the carrots are drained, I'm putting them into this little immersion cup that I have, but if you don't have one of these, you can just use a regular blender, but it's such a small amount that I think the immersion blender is gonna be fine. To make these carrots nice and creamy, I'm taking about a tablespoon of heavy cream to add to this, and this is also gonna help blend them up. I might need a little bit more, so I'm just kind of guessing as I'm going here. I haven't written a recipe for this, I'm just going off of memory. And then we make baby food. Very difficult to do this small amount. In a real kitchen, I'd be making like a gallon of this stuff. So just kind of hand mush the carrots just a little bit. Now the carrots do need a bit of salt and some pepper because these are not seasoned with anything other than the heavy cream, which has no salt or pepper in it. I'm only gonna take about half of the ginger that I had cut up and put it into here because it's quite a bit and you don't want it to be incredibly strong. Carrots and ginger go incredibly well together and actually make an amazing soup. But this is what the starting point of my carrot and ginger puree looks like. And I say starting point because when I go to reheat this, I'm going to reheat this in a saute pan so it tightens up just a little bit before we serve it. The carrots are done, the onions are done. Now the beets for the third puree and for the plate up as a vegetable are going to take another like 2 hours. So in that time, I'm going to explain to you what I think is the most important part of the dish, and no, it is not the filet mignon. This is the most important part of this dish. Outside of the filet mignon, yes, the filet is important, but this sauce is gold. This is my homemade demi-glace sauce. This sauce took 50 hours to make. It is the same sauce I used when I did the 1 hour versus 50-hour version of Yukihita's Transforming Rice to see which one was better because I was incredibly curious. And now I'm going to explain to you exactly how I made this sauce. At the Jujutsu Kaisen dinner, they had given us a side of sauce, which we thought, Emily had called it gravy. To me, it was more of a demi-glace. Demi-glace in Japan is very different than a French demi-glace in a lot of ways. It's a little more thick, it's a little more unctuous. Maybe they add a thickener to it, maybe they don't make it traditional. But I tried to make demi-glace in the most traditional way I remember how from learning in school and from working in restaurants. And that is a multi-step process to make a single sauce that Chef Cochran in school literally called liquid gold because of how expensive it is not only to make, but how expensive it is for labor. To make this sauce, I start off with some beef bones. This is around 3 to 3.5 pounds of beef bones. I take these beef bones and I throw them in the oven at 500 degrees Fahrenheit to roast for about 15 minutes. After those bones have roasted, this goes into a very large stock pot along with some onions, carrots, and celery, otherwise known as mirepoix. This broth has to simmer overnight, a minimum of 24 hours. What I'm really looking for is to reduce this sauce by half, or I should say this bone broth by half. Once it's reduced by half and it's gone those 24 to 30 hours to extract as much gelatin from the bones as possible, this is when I'm going to strain out all of that liquid, leaving behind the bones and the onions and everything else. This is the broth that I'm starting with, and this is the broth I'm going to use to make the demi-glace. Since demi-glace is a traditional brown sauce, we have to add a few more things to the beef broth to make it into a demi-glace. I'm taking a large stock pot and I'm caramelizing the bottom of a few onions. This is around 3 or 4 onions that I'm just searing off in a touch of oil. We don't want too much fat here. While those onions are caramelizing and getting nice and brown, I'm gonna skim the fat off of the top of my beef broth. This is really important. You really don't want any additional fats on the demi-glace because it can cause the sauce to separate. So removing the fat is very, very important when making a demi-glace. Now that the fat has been skimmed and those onions are nice and charred, I'm going to remove the onions from that same pot, making sure we use the same pot the entire time, and add in a good amount of tomato paste. The tomato paste gives it a ton of umami flavor, a little bit of acidity to it, a nice body. It thickens up the sauce quite nicely. And this tomato paste has to get cooked for about 5 or 6 minutes just to kind of help it cook along, and because it does help sweeten the sauce a bit by cooking that tomato paste. Once the tomato paste has been cooked, this is where I add in a good amount of red wine. The red wine helps deglaze everything, and this is why I had mentioned it's very important to use the same pot the entire time when making the demi. Once that wine has reduced by half, I'm throwing all of my beef broth into this along with those onions. I'm also throwing in some thyme that I'd stolen from my neighbor's garden, a few peppercorns, and some bay leaves. I'm not going to season this with salt until the very end to make sure I can season it properly. If I were to season it with salt now, it may be too salty by the time the sauce has reduced. So now this demi-glace has to reduce for another 5 or 6 hours to get nice and thick. I started off with around 15 to 20 gallons of water, and I'm going to end up with this. After straining my demi-glace, I put it into this container, which you now see before you today with the section missing because I ate it. All of that liquid and all of that time turned into this. It is not a lot of liquid. This is not even a full container, but this will make the difference in this dish. Demi-glace can go on everything. I literally was dipping pita chips in this and it was amazing. But now with 2 of our sides done, the onions and the carrot puree, along with the demi-glace, our carrots are nicely roasted and these are gonna be ready to go. We're just gonna cut them in half before service and saute them up. I still have to wait on those beets. That was a terrible joke. I apologize. I'll see you guys in a couple of hours when those beets are ready. Now, after a couple of hours, the beets are ready. You can see they're pretty hard roasted, but that's okay because I don't want them to be incredibly soft. I just want them to be soft enough to peel and to cut for a side plus a puree. It'll make sense at the end. To peel beets, I like to take a couple of paper towels and just start pulling the skin back, and I totally bought the wrong beets. You know, I was at a farmer's market and I couldn't tell what beets these were, and these almost look like candy cane beets. They have this really beautiful red, kind of pale peach tint to them, and I needed red beets. So now Megumi is going to be much prettier than he should be because that title belongs to Gojo. Support local farmers, even if they don't properly label their produce. Oh, it's hot. Ideally, I would wait for these to cool down a little bit before I peel them, but we're gonna burn the other hand because we burned this one earlier and we're just gonna burn this one too. Now, 2 of these beets are gonna be used for dinner, which is still quite a bit of beets. We don't need 2 of them for dinner, but I'm gonna save 2. And then 1 of them is going to be turned into the puree. Now, I wasn't quite sure what they put into their beet puree. So much like everything else in this recipe that I'm remembering by memory, I'm actually going to make this into what I think is a pretty good beet puree. So I'm gonna take this very hot beet, I'm gonna chop it up into small pieces, hoping to not cut my hand off. That is a candy cane beet. That's beautiful. So the reason why they call this a candy cane beet is because when you cut it open, you can see the layers that are in there, which kind of is striped, kind of like a candy cane. They're called candy cane beets, okay? Now, because beets are very, very earthy, and in this case, this is a little bit sweeter, which is nice, I'm going to add a touch of white wine vinegar to brighten it up and to help puree it. But I don't want to do too much, because if I do, it's going to turn into a full puree and liquid, and it's not going to be able to be formed. Warning, this is going to be very loud. Oh God, it's not blending. This is the problem with making such small amounts of things. Very hard to get them pureed. Perfect. This is what this looks like now. It's a little loose, you know, but maybe we'll tighten it up later. Ooh. Oh, that's sweet. Little pinch of salt. There is my beautiful now candy cane beet puree, because I bought the wrong beets, okay? Now we're gonna have two things that are kind of orange. Now with all the sauces done, the sides are done. There's one thing left to do, realistically. Make Gojo's prison. I've spent the last 2 days prepping this meal, mostly because of the demi-glace. And now it's time to finally put everything together. And for that, I have this really beautiful 8-ounce filet mignon. Now, I'm not quite sure which steak they served us at that cafe, at that restaurant. I'm pretty sure it was filet because of how tender it was and how flavorful it was. But the one thing I didn't like is that they were cut into very small cubes. They had done that to represent Gojo's prison realm that he was stuck in. And I thought, well, why don't we just make a giant prison realm instead? I think it would be much more fitting, and you can make a nicer steak that way versus those little chunked up cubes that they had done, which was still really good. I think I would just want this instead. Now, because I don't want to waste too much of this steak, I'm taking the sharpest knife that I have, and I'm just going to trim off a very small amount of this to square it up. This way we get that really nice edged prison realm look, and this stuff, these scraps, are going to be turned into tacos. Really trying not to remove a ton of the steak. And I think that looks beautiful. And there is my cube steak prison realm, nice and squared off. This thing is ready to seal Gojo for however many years he gets sealed, because I'm not caught up to the manga yet. Steak is done. Now I have to prep the rest of my sides. I'm going to be using only 2 carrots for this, and I'm going to be cutting these right down the center and splitting them. This way they look really nice on the plate. And trim this piece off, get this one split as well. And the carrots I'm going to cook in a pan with some butter right before we plate up. Now for the candy cane beet, which was supposed to be a red beet, I'm thinking I'm going to maybe slice these. This way, when we slice them, you can see the nice spiral. We're gonna do 3 slices of beets. This way this will go on the plate. You can see how beautiful that looks on the inside. You really want to showcase that because it's a nice vegetable. It's a very nice vegetable. Now the other 3 sides, which are the 3 sauces that represent 3 of Gojo's students, are going to be warmed up gently. And by that, I mean in the microwave for about 30 seconds instead of getting like 800 pots and pans dirty. To do the steak, I'm gonna be searing it in this mini saute pan, and I'm gonna finish it in that toaster oven back there because we just really need a toaster oven. You don't need a giant oven to do any of this realistically. The beets themselves are also going to be warmed in the oven, not too long because they're fully cooked. And like I said earlier, the carrots, they're just gonna be cooked in a little bit of butter. I'm gonna season my steak, make sure it is nicely seasoned on all sides. Also hit it with some cracked black pepper. And this is going to be seared in just a bit of vegetable oil first, and then I'm gonna throw in a little bit of butter before I put it in the oven. Once my oil is hot, the steak is going to go right in there for a nice sear. These other pieces of steak, I'm actually not gonna save them for taco, and I'm just gonna eat them right now because I'm kind of hungry. Ooh, that's nice. Gonna give this a flip, and I'm just gonna continue to sear this on all sides. Take out my Scooby snacks because those are for me. Oh my God, that is so tender. I cannot wait to have that with that demi-glace we had made. You know what? I don't even think this needs butter. There's my beautiful sear on my cube steak. This is going in the oven until it's about medium rare, which honestly is not gonna take very long, probably just a couple of minutes. I'm gonna clean this pan out, saute the carrots, get those hot, and then I'm gonna start heating up my sauces because I'm actually gonna be running out of time. Gonna do a little dab of butter right into the pan. And as that butter melts, I'm gonna throw my carrots in there. You're gonna get them nice and warm, get that nice butter flavor on them. Now while this is cooking, these beets are gonna go in the oven along with the filet because there's a little bit of room so those can warm up too. And I'm going to start warming up my sides. This is the soy onion. Then I have my carrot and ginger. Then I have this beautiful beet puree, which actually ended up getting pretty red from the candy cane being pureed by hand. These carrots, done. That's all I wanted them to do. Hang out in the butter. I'm gonna move these over here. I'm gonna heat up my demi-glace in my Arabic coffee maker. Look at how thick this demi is. Well, we don't need that much. That goes a long, long way. Now here's the thing with the plate up. I'm not quite sure how I want to plate this up. So I'm just gonna go for it and see where my plate up takes me. I also made a balsamic vinegar gastrique, which is just balsamic vinegar and sugar that I reduced just a little bit so it gets nice and syrupy. The reason for that is because I wanted an additional sauce for the carrots. Balsamic is notoriously good with carrots, and I'm going to paint this onto the plate similarly how Sukuna painted the town red. Is that too far? We're gonna get super pretentious and use plating tongs. I think the steak sits here. And then the beets, instead of these bigger beets, I'm actually just gonna cut them. And then I have my 3 sauces for the 3 students. Those are going to go here, I think, to balance the plate. I guess we can do baby quenelles. We're gonna do little baby ones. It's just where you shape a puree with 2 spoons, kind of going back and forth like this. Put that there. Do the same thing with the carrot and ginger. We're gonna go there. And then finally, the candy cane beet puree. We're gonna go there. Now last but not least is this demi-glace. I think we're gonna go across here. I think that'll look really nice. Missing one thing, a little finishing salt. We're gonna do this beautiful sea salt that I have right on top of the beets. And there, my friends, is what I would consider an upgrade to Gojo's Prison Realm dinner that we had in Shibuya. I love the way it came out. I love the colors. I love the synergy. The reason why I like doing plate ups like this is because you can tell people that you can eat everything on the plate. There's no garnish that you can't eat. You can literally eat everything here, which is how a plate up should be. The one thing that I didn't quite care for in that Shibuya plate up was the fried parsnips. Now, it was during the fall, so parsnips were in season, but there was no other parsnips on the plate. Some of the garnishes were just kind of there. And honestly, this is super colorful, but we are in the summertime, so those colors do pop out more. But man, I'm pretty stoked with this. I think if I were served this plate, I would be excited to eat it. Now I'm pretty excited to eat this because I think it's going to be amazing, but I put all of those adventures in my book, Quest for the Best Tokyo. Quest for the Best Tokyo is a collection of adventures that I had all throughout Tokyo on my search for some of the best anime food I could find. Not only are you going to be able to read and experience all of those stories, but I included recipes based on all of the foods that I had eaten in Tokyo. So even if you can't make it out to Japan, you can experience Japan at home by making some of those recipes and following along with some of the really fun stories we had had. I was joined by amazing fellow YouTubers who took me around town and showed me some of the best anime food we could find. We played a bunch of games and we discovered a bunch of new places, and honestly, it was one of the most memorable experiences of my life. I want to share that with you in my book, Quest for the Best Tokyo. If you want to pick up your copy, you can pick it up right now at CHEFPK.com. And if you pick up my other book, Annie Bites, which is filled with a ton of amazing anime-based recipes, you can get both books at a discounted price. It's going to be the same price that the Kickstarters paid for their early bird special, so you're really getting a deal for both books. Buying books helps support the channel directly, and honestly, I couldn't do any of this without you guys buying these books. I really hope you get a ton of value and have some fun with them, because I had a blast making them for you. So if you want to pick up the books and support the channel directly, head over to chefpk.com at the description down below and get an early bird special on both books. Now, it is time to eat this awesome Jujutsu Kaisen dinner, but better. I went there. Now the first thing I really want to do is cut the steak right down the middle to see. I went for a rare, to be honest. I know I said medium rare, but I was like, you know what? I just want a really rare steak. Let's see. Ooh, okay. That's a medium rare. First thing is tasting the steak with just the demi-glace. Cheers to 2 days of work. That demi-glace has an insane amount of flavor. You can taste the sweetness from the tomato paste and from the wine and the depths of the onions and the beefiness of the stock. Everything comes through. I don't even care about the other 3 sauces, but I'm going to eat them just because I should. So the way I ate this in Shibuya was I took a piece of the steak with some of the demi-glace, and then I would take one of the sauces, and in this case, it's going to be the onion and soy reduction, or I guess puree. This is gonna be the first bite. Cheers. It's rich and deep, has this amazing mouthfeel, this saltiness. The flavors of the onions in there, cooked with the butter and the soy sauce, is completely different than the taste of the onions inside the demi-glace. I love that about doing food like this. Now, what I could imagine the carrot and ginger giving this is a brighter flavor. Cheers. Completely different flavor. Ginger, a little strong. Carrots, a little sweet. The filet, admittedly, gets a little bit lost, but I still like it. And then we have the beet puree with a touch of white wine vinegar. Interesting. The beet, much sweeter than the carrot. There's no sweetness in the onions realistically compared to the other two. I feel like if you ate them in this order, you should go beet, carrot, then the onion reduction, because the onion reduction is very robust. The other two are a little bit brighter, a little bit sweeter. The onion is a nice finish. Let's try one of these carrots with a little bit of this gastrique. Oh, the butter browned just ever so slightly. You get this beautiful nutty flavor that comes with browned butter. The saltiness is there. The sweetness from the gastrique is really nice, plus the little bit of acidity. Fantastic carrots. Now, the candy cane beets were basically roasted and then a little bit of salt right on top. That's a beautiful beet. I don't know what to say. I wish anime cafes did more of this stuff. I was extremely disappointed in most of the cafes we went to other than the Jujutsu Kaisen cafe. Granted, this is very expensive to make. I understand why they can't do it, but man, maybe find a middle ground, you know? If you guys want to see more of these anime cafes but better, let me know in the comments down below. I'm gonna be doing research. I will just go to Japan and do a bunch of research, eat at a bunch of these places, then make a bunch of videos if that's what you guys really want. And to do that, you can pick up my books down in the description down below at chefpk.com to make that happen so I can report back to you. My name is Chef PK, and remember, keep playing with your food.